we have a new mystery project. Fresh off of eBay. I think I paid too much money for this one, as usual, but let's see. Whoever did this packed this really well. I'm impressed. Ready for this? What a pile of junk. Wow. It is a hunk of junk. But what do we have here? 262 XP. Little crack there, but that's going to be inconsequential. So, it would be nice if that was pristine. So we have a giant hunk of junk here. 262 XP. This thing has been, per usual, ridden hard and put away wet. Let's see if we can't redo this. Now, the one saving grace to this thing, supposedly, is that the piston and the cylinder is still good. Let's see if that's correct or not. Need a box here. Might as well use the original box. I'm going to have to clean this up. That looks like it'll clean up. Put a new cord in there. Clean that up a little bit. New sticker. If I can find a new cover for that too, well, I may get that, but maybe not. So yeah, the saving grace here is supposedly this piston and cylinder is pristine. Yikes. Can you actually see how terrible that is? It's got junk on it. Like a lot of it. And it's got a rub on it. Might still work. Hopefully it still works. Crank turns. No play. Good. That's a plus there. That works. Let's take and do something silly like measure the squish first before we do anything else. Because I want to know where we're going to put this thing. Oh, there's a gasket. Oh, we don't want to lose that. I probably am going to get just a new gasket kit for the whole thing. That way we don't have any trouble there. But problem is these gaskets are like $2, $3, $4, $5 a piece. Sometimes it just gets utterly silly for sort of thing. check the squish. Fresh piece of solder. That's not flat at all. Okay. So now we need a different piece of solder. Solder here, let's see how this goes. Problem is I don't have a flywheel to and the squish band is probably not completely flat, so I have to take it from the shortest measurement. Now the problem with this saw is that you really (25 and 15) 41, 2, so 42. So squish is probably somewhere around 42 thousandths. So I can cut 22 thousandths off the case, but we've got another problem. This case, she's broke. That's broke. We've got a lot of issues with this thing. We'll get it fixed. I'm going to just dismantle the whole thing, take it down just to pieces, and we'll see where that leaves us. So I'm just going to take a few parts off. I'd love to take the cylinder off here and see where that's at. Looks like T25 for these, which is a little odd. Never seen a T25 on a Husqvarna before. Just seems odd. Okay. A little worse for the wear, but still a fine piece, I think. Not really worried about that. This unit actually has the metal seal retainer here, which I guess is a good thing. It's actually a much smaller cylinder than I thought it'd be. It's really kind of cute. Usually I have my power tools to do this. But they're upstairs for another project, so which is a whole other topic. Those look like the usual screws I'm used to from Husky. Boy, I'm hoping this cylinder is pristine. I really am, because I bought a hunk of junk if it isn't. Well, the ring seems to be free. A little bit up and down there, but that's not a big deal. Nice and clean on the inside, a little dry, a little kind of overheated looking. Like somebody didn't use great lubrication. But whatever is going on in here, that is not scored. Could use a little cleanup, but that ain't scored. That looks nice. Oh, interesting. I may not actually need to machine this part. I may just be able to take it off of here, assuming I'm not cutting the squish band, which I don't know if I want to. But boy, did we get lucky here. That is very, very nice. Alright, so I'm going to clean this all up. Once I get it cleaned up, I'll probably get to the stage where I'm going to take the case halves apart with the puller that I've kind of fabricated. And once we got that, then I'll show you putting it back together. So at this point, basically this saw needs nearly everything. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot on here I'm going to be able to salvage. The rear handle I think I can salvage. I'll clean that up. Tough when you're doing a full rebuild because you're going to spend about 3,000 times more than you wanted to, but oh well. This is going to take a long time because I got to gather all the parts and I got to do it as cheaply as possible, and that's tricky to do. But let's see if we can get this down to, well, let's see if we can crack the case. If I can crack the case today, I think we're going to be in fine shape. So let's put a piston stop in there. Like that. I happen to be playing around with the degree wheel, but you really can't use the degree wheel until you figure out where you're going to set the squish and all that. So I was just using this as a demonstration for a friend of mine. So let's pull that off. Next I need to pull the clutch off, and it looks like there's oil leaking out of this, so obviously I gotta drain this. I gotta pull this clutch off. I'm kind of hoping my clutch puller is gonna fit. It looks like no. Great, so I'm gonna have to make another one. Okay, so I'll grind on this and then we'll see if we can take this off. So I've got this ground. Seems to fit right here. Let's see if it comes off. Seems like it doesn't want to. Really doesn't want to come off. Gonna have to put this down on the ground here. Let's see. I think I need to have this ground down a little bit further just to give me a little more bite. We'll get it. Well, that was one of the hardest clutches I've ever taken off. Part of it is the tool, so I had to grind a 19mm socket, get it in here, and off is this direction. I actually had to use a 3/8 wrench and 3/8 ratchet, and as I went like this I needed a breaker bar too. I used this copper pipe in order to get it, and eventually it did give way. So let's remove this and see what's under here. One of the reasons the impact didn't work was partly because the tool here that I ground was actually impacting against the pieces that moved, so it was springing pieces, and impacts need to hit something solid, not something springy. So this will work, at least for now. I'll put that in my collection of stuff. Some big washer in here, never seen one of those. Rim drive. Seems to be all right. Here's the needle bearing, which is all gunky looking. That's terrible. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I've never taken one of these apart before, so what I'm going to do with this is a zip tie, just to hold it together. Just like that. 3mm Allens to remove the oiler. Small screws, these look like they're on with red Loctite. It's just an oiler, why is it on with red Loctite? No Loctite on that one. You know what I didn't do before I do this? Might want to drain the oil. That would be kind of smart. I've learned that these oil caps actually do break fairly easily, so you don't really want to put them on with a wrench. You try to put them on a wrench, it'll pop, and then you don't have a functional saw. So let's see if we can get this removed. How do we remove it? Still haven't gotten the oiler out. I'm going to take the cylinder head off, which is only on with a couple of bolts. Right now, anyway. Cylinder heads off, and this one didn't have a base gasket. No goop either. It does look dark out down inside there, and this is pretty cooked, so I'm wondering if this saw did actually have an air leak. Somebody deleted the base gasket. Still has a squish of like 42, so somebody deleted the base gasket, but they didn't actually put goop on when they did that. They're supposed to put at least some type of sealer. Anyway, hopefully this thing actually cleans up. Let's pull this thing out. Wow, well, it's a good thing. Good thing that just died. at least while it's here. There's a rubber piece in here. There's a pawl, there's a screw, and there's a rubber piece, a keeper, that if it goes, then you lose the tensioner here, chain tensioner, and these pieces are not cheap. Turns out that rubber piece did actually go on me. Good news is that we just got a bunch of this specific new parts here for my dad's saws. Should be identical, and I can get a piece there and it should hold fine. The pawl and the screw usually don't go bad. It's this silly rubber piece that goes there that keeps the whole thing from falling out. I just pulled out one of these, looks like anti-vibe rubber pieces. This looks okay. Looks like there's another one over here. Probably don't have to remove these, but I'm going to. This one over here doesn't look like it's in such good shape. Yeah, that doesn't look so good. So we'll write that part number down too. Let's remove the ignition coil here. Three millimeter Allens, 2 screws. Wires are going to come out. Hey, this one actually unscrews. I make it a new ignition coil wire. That would be a good thing to get. So with as many parts as this saw needs, you get the sense that it's just not going to pay to rebuild this saw. Now, I'm going to do it anyway, for the fun-ish, but clearly it's not, you know, this is not a financially smart venture. In the end, I might have a $500 saw, but I'm going to be way more than that into it, I think. Now I got to figure out how to get this case apart. You know what? Let's take this throttle thing off. Throttle linkage is off. Let's take this piece off. T25 on here. Looks like I'm running out of battery on my camera. I'll go get new. No wonder I can't get the oiler out. There are 2 holes here that you're supposed to insert threaded screws into, so I'm going to use, it's M5. Which I believe are the cylinder head bolts. Those should work. So let's see if that actually does work. work them side to side evenly, supposedly. There, that's lifting that. That lifts that. Lifts that. And that's actually as far deep as those go. So now this should just lift up. Of course, all the alternative is might just fall back down too. Or I need longer M5 bolts. Where am I going to get longer M5 bolts? How about really long M5 bolts? These are exhaust bolts from a 350. Something tells me that shouldn't have been that hard. So this clearly goes on there. And there's a copper piece on there. Some type of worm gear. Looks pretty stripped to me. That's not good. Looks like there's a rubber piece here that directs the oil somewhere there. I'll bet the oil goes into there and up into here and then out. That rubber piece, and this tiny little rubber piece is used up, which it doesn't feel fresh. Let's get a fresh one of those. Feels like this oiler dip tube could use a refresh too. Rubber gets all stiff after a while, so I'll see if I actually have another rubber piece. That part's probably okay. Let's take the piston off. We'll do that next. I'm going to pull the pins out. Circlips. You just pull these right on out. And don't lose them. And I usually just push the wrist pin out by tapping on it a few times here. Wrist pins usually slide in nice and easy. This one's been cooked a bit. Needle bearing, very important to not lose that thing. I really do not know what it's going to take to crack this case. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 visible bolt holes. So let's remove those. So these are the main bolts that hold this together. Not very tight. Not tight at all. Not tight. Not tight. Not tight. And again, the case here is broken, so there's one at the back. A little guy at the back over here. Broken piece. I'm going to put these on a separate magnetic tray. This broken piece is handy for one reason, and that's for the on-off switch, so let's remove that. Let's do flathead. And the on-off switch has tabs on it, which are probably quite likely to get broken. I think these switches are intended to be one-way items. Once it goes in, it don't come out type of thing. There. There we go. I just hit the switch with some cleaner and it's salvaged. Now before I try to pull this thing apart, there's an oil seal over on this side. I read something about the oil seal, that the metal ones are better than the plastic ones because they don't have the heat issues. So I happen to have a metal one here. I'm going to salvage this if I can. Three flathead screws. These are brass pan heads, looks like. They're not on tight. Is panhead? Is that what this is called? I think so. Just get the screwdriver under there. Maybe that's the seal. I think I'm going to get a new seal for this side. This is supposed to be the seal holder, but whatever's going on here feels hard. It doesn't feel like it's sealing well. Could be part of the air leak issue. Again, the air leak is just a guess of mine, but that bearing looks pretty cooked. Two exhaust bolts from the front. Little guys. I put this on hand tight. I think this oil cap is probably a good one. Salvage that. Time to get the puller and fit it up to this. This particular saw has a worm gear on it. Before I attempt to crack the chassis here, I gotta get the worm gear off. This is pressed on, and I don't have the tool to remove that. There is a specific tool to do it. You thread it on, and then it is a puller, essentially. So then you thread the puller down and it just pulls off. I've ordered a new one because this one is messed up, but I may actually convert this to plastic so it's something you don't have to press on. The pressing on it here is stupid. Anyway, in order to get it off, I was thinking, well, maybe I could heat it. So if I could heat just that and then wedge a screwdriver in here, I might actually be able to just pull it right off. So I figured out something interesting. That's actually a die. 7/8 NC9 or 22 by 2.5. That's a die that's on the worm gear. How do I turn it? I don't know. So the idea here is if I can actually turn this, if I can spin that, the die will want to move down, but eventually it'll hit the case. And so if I can continue to turn it, instead of the die moving down, the worm gear will move up. That's my theory. Do you like it? Don't know if it'll work, but that's the best I got on short notice here. So I'm going to try to pull this worm gear off. Somebody on the forum said it was 3/4 inch NPT. It's not. It's 1/2 inch NPT. I've tried all kinds of different things to pull this off. We're going to try this with something simple. This is a 3/4 to 1 inch black pipe fitting and a 3/4 to 1/2 inch bushing. I'm sure there are other ways to do this, but what I did was I ground on here, and you'll be able to see why here in a minute. We're going to thread this down, and I need to stop the crank somehow, so I'm going to stuff some nylon in here. I thread this down pretty good. So I've just got a piece of, I got a socket in there just to give me a little more height, and now I'm going to stick a puller for, I forget what this is used for. This is a ball joint puller. I forget what I typically use it for though. And I'm about out of space there. Still, let's see. So let's see if this works. Probably didn't need much. Let me go the other way, because I'm out of room here. Doesn't want to come. Ah, you know what? Let me stick another socket on there. Again, I gotta get just a little bit more height on the puller here. Maybe that'll work a little bit better. I have tried everything to get this thing off, and it just doesn't want to do it. I tried heating it, pulling it. I was gonna get if I had had a nut that was actually the correct thread. By the way, the thread is 7/8, 9 threads per inch, although 1/2 inch NPT actually works. Don't understand national pipe thread, but whatever. So you keep working it. Piece of nylon, again, nylon string in as a crank stop. At this point, it's almost off. Just need to get it the rest of the way. These sockets don't really make good chunks of metal. I need a chunk of metal, and I don't really have it. Got an old castellated nut. Maybe that'll work. Again, all I'm doing is just trying to take up the space between the tip of this and essentially the head of the crank. So as long as I can take up that space, like if this was longer, this would be a piece of cake. This would have been done, but I guess that's another, just get a bolt. That's it. Something loosened. And that's it. That's all she wrote, folks. And there's your copper nut stuck in a 1/2 inch NPT pipe fitting. So if you actually had a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, or even 1/2 inch to 3/4 and use that puller, I think it would work even better. So I don't. This was adapted. I got to figure out how to get this out of there. I may just throw this thing away. I may just throw the adapter here away because, well, it's cheap enough. We did it, Christopher. Now we get to crack the case. To demonstrate what I have here, this is just a piece of 2x2 square steel, and I have a couple of holes drilled in it over here where the bar studs come through, and I've got some bar nuts and some washers in there. But what that does is it holds this piece down to the down to the saw. Now you have to have a cutout over here to relieve the steel so that this piece can stick up into it. And then there's a nut that's welded here. I don't remember the size of this. It might be 5/8. But what this is a puller that I made for the wheels on my lawn tractor. Silly, right? Well, so this is a long, basically piece of threaded rod that I have a nut that's actually welded to it. And with this, I can now thread this down and press on the crank. So I am trying to split the case. And you can see that this is not split. No idea if this will work or not. Per usual, I don't know whether this will work or not. It did work on another case that I had. So let's hit this with the impact. Here's hoping I removed all the screws. I don't see anything else holding this on, but I'm kind of wondering if these screws up here actually hold this whole thing in the front together, or they just hold the dogs on. So I'm going to undo this, and I'll undo that, and I'll report back whether or not they actually hold anything together or not. Let's remove these two here. That looks pretty long to me. Apparently, these two hold the dog on and they hold the case together. I know I could configure this better, but I'm just not that worried about it right now. Let's get the impact back on. Here we go. Let's see if she goes. Let's see if I can just... You can see it opening up. And that's it. We have a cracked case. Those bearings look kind of cooked. Cooked bearings for sure. Next I'm going to try popping the oil seal out. Going to need new on this too. Cool. This happens to be a 5/8 socket. It's just a hair smaller than the oil seal, and you pop it towards the outside. Because I'm throwing out this half of the case because it's broken, I'm removing the positioners. They happen to be stuck 1, 2, and next I'm going to see if I can remove the crank. In order to do this, I need a flywheel nut. You put the flywheel nut on. This one does not want to go on so good. You want to thread it down till just before flush. Now I'm going to heat the case next and take a hammer and whack it and see if the whole thing separates. So I'm going to take this and heat it. We're going to start here 64.7, 65 degrees. We're aiming for about 250. So, which means that if you have about 250, it's right about the time your smoke alarms want to go off. So don't want to have too much stuff that's flammable around. And you start heating it, basically. I've got a piece of wood I can set this down on, so. The only thing here that's sacred is the crank itself. So we're not quite there on the temperature. Let's go a little further. $250. That's good. Let's give it a whack. Hey, look. Perfect. We can throw this piece of junk out. Now we have that which is sacred, which is the crank, but I'm going to have to change those bearings. And I have to look up how to do that, and I'll get back to you.